Hello, everybody, and thanks for watching and hopefully also commenting on this presentation. My name is Christina Förster, and I'm a teacher educator and research assistant in the project Translang Square, written out. This presentation introduces what we call the Translang Square as a conjecture-driven design framework for digital translanguaging in teacher education. It is situated within our project context at the University of Hildesheim in Germany. The focus of this paper is not on evaluating an intervention, but on making the underlying design logic explicit and discussable within the SITE community. Or more specifically, we articulate design conjectures that are grounded in previous empirical findings and structured through a design-based research perspective. The starting point of this study is what we describe as an uptake gap and therefore a problem of practice. Digital translanguaging or translanguaging in general is widely perceived as relevant in teacher education. At the same time, participation in corresponding learning opportunities remained limited in the context of our project. This discrepancy motivates the study. Instead of treating this as an attitudinal problem on the side of pre-service teachers, we approach it as a design problem. The contribution, therefore, is the formulation of explicit and testable design conjectures. The design focus follows expectancy-value considerations, particularly feasibility and institutional consequentiality. The conceptual foundation of the project as a whole, including this investigation, is a translanguaging perspective. Translanguaging is understood as repertoire-based meaning-making. Learners, speakers, draw on their full linguistic and semiotic resources rather than operating within bounded named languages. So translanguaging differs in this regard from code switching, for instance. Digital translanguaging extends this perspective by foregrounding multimodality, networked interaction, and artifact production. Within teacher education, all these practices are not neutral. They are shaped by institutional structures and disciplinary norms, which often reproduce so-called monolingual habitus. This slide shows the initial learning architecture we developed in the Translang Square project, following an infusion approach as proposed in 2019 by Volker and colleagues. It spans different phases of teacher education from bachelor to master level and into thesis work, basically what you could call a full teacher education student life cycle. Several formats are deliberately connected, as you can see, including transnational seminars, digitally enabled mobility formats, and low threshold learning opportunities, such as the digital translanguaging coffee breaks or the participatory conference-like format teacher translanguaging camp. Despite this structurally diverse and theoretically founded architecture, participation remained uneven when we piloted the digital translanguaging coffee breaks last year, which are designed as a virtual transnational facilitated dialogue space in which learners can gain experiences in what it's actually like to use your full linguistic repertoire in online learning. The same lack of pre-service teacher engagement could be observed when we piloted the teacher translation camp that you can see below, a hybrid week-long conference aiming to make student research on translanguaging and multilingualism in education visible and connect pre-service teachers to a digital community of practice. In particular, pre-service teachers who were not already connected to the project showed limited, almost no engagement whatsoever. This observation defines the problem of practice addressed in this paper. In response to this problem of practice, we redesigned the learning architecture and integrated a participatory guided digital repository showcasing student-generated artifacts related to digital translanguaging in education, which we call the Translang Square. In this context, this study is guided by two research questions. The first asks which design conjectures underpin the Translang Square as a digitally mediated learning format. The second question focuses on how empirical insights into expectancy value orientations of pre-service teachers and teacher educators inform the design logic. Together, these questions shift the focus from outcomes to design reasoning. As a theoretical lens, we draw on situated expectancy-value theory. Participation is, according to this theory, conceptualized as a function of expectancy, perceived value, and perceived cost. Very importantly, these components are not individual traits, but situated. They are shaped by social and institutional contexts. Costs in this regard include not only effort and time, but also opportunity costs, psychological load, etc. Teacher educators play a central role as socializers, influencing what is perceived as legitimate and worthwhile engagement. The study follows a design-based research approach. Design and empirical inquiry are combined iteratively in authentic educational contexts in DBR. The present paper here represents design synthesis phase. It integrates findings from earlier empirical cycles into a coherent redesign. To structure this process, we use conjecture mapping following Sandoval. This allows us to distinguish between so-called design embodiments, mediating processes, and intended outcomes. The aim behind this is to make the theory of change explicit and thus also discussable or criticizable within a broader scientific community context. The redesign is grounded in three empirical strands. First, observations of participation patterns indicate limited uptake, which I initially described and which is documented in a sort of continuous research diary, which is a typical practice in design-based research. Second, survey data with pre-service teachers show a consistent pattern. High perceived value on the one hand, but lower expectancy and salient costs. Third, interviews with teacher educators that we conducted reveal that translanguaging is recognized as relevant, yet often subordinated to disciplinary norms and feasibility constraints. Taken together, these findings suggest that limited participation cannot be explained by perceived value alone. Instead, expectancy and cost structures are decisive. This leads to the redesign of the learning architecture. The Translang², which you can see in turquoise in the middle, is introduced as a structurally integrated format within the whole program. It connects different elements of the study trajectory from bachelor to master level and into thesis work. The format is designed as a semester-long hybrid community of practice. It is accredited with ECTS credits and focuses on the on student-led design of multilingual transfer tasks within subject-specific contexts. Importantly, the Translang² is not an isolated intervention. It is embedded within the broader architecture and connected to other existing formats. The design conjectures are operationalized through specific embodiment features. First, participation in key formats is ECTS credited, positioning translanguaging within the formal curriculum. Secondly, a shared repository enables curation, feedback, and the circulation of artifacts. Third, task structures include transfer tasks, peer review, and co-creation. Fourth, resources are designed for reuse across courses and semesters by teacher educators and pre-service teachers alike. And with this, the idea is also to work towards closing the implementation gap or the practice gap that is often reported in translanguaging research. Finally, discursive practice include both active translanguaging and critical reflection on monolingual norms. These design features directly address expectancy value conditions. ECTS accreditation and curricular anchoring or integration reduce external costs by aligning participation with already existing study requirements. Scaffolded tasks, feedback, and visible output support expectancy by making success experiences more accessible for pre-service teachers. Repositories and templates reduce preparation costs and increase orientation. At the same time, shared artifacts help address the lack of role models reported by pre-service teachers, which we identified in our empirical data quite prominently. Importantly, the design does not aim to increase value directly, but to align existing value with institutional and disciplinary relevance. The conjecture map that you can find in the full paper makes this theory of change explicit. Design embodiment is expected to generate specific mediating processes. These include the use of full linguistic repertoires and multimodal repertoires, collaborative resource development, peer feedback, and the reuse and adaptation of materials. A critical element is the integration of student-generated artifacts into regular coursework by faculty, by teacher educators. The intended outcomes are threefold, you can say: learning about translanguaging, motivation, and sustainable implementation. These outcomes, however, remain hypothesized at this stage because the Translang² has not been implemented yet. The contribution we're trying to make with this paper lies in articulating design knowledge in the form of explicit conjectures. These conjectures are intended to be tested and refined in subsequent design circles. However, at the current stage, no outcome evaluation can be provided, obviously. The design remains context-specific, and the empirical strands are not integrated into a single mixed methods design. Future work will focus on implementation and long-term investigation within further DBR cycles. Thank you so much for listening and for reading the paper. I'm very happy to continue the conversation with you here on SITE2026, and I thoroughly welcome feedback from you and your expertise on both the design and the underlying conjectures that I presented here. Thank you so much.